remember that she did that. So that's going to freak her out, and she's going to think, how do you know I did that? Like, you must be associated with these people over here. I didn't choose to tell you that. So you have to have an idea about how present they are when you're talking about some of this stuff. You don't want to talk negatively about their pimp/boyfriend. We talked a little bit about that. You don't need to ask why they didn't leave. I mean, really, it doesn't matter at this point. It's really irrelevant. Saying that things will be okay. I talk about this in every presentation that I give about any of this kind of stuff. Our definition of what's okay is probably very different than their definition of what's okay. If we tell someone it's okay, that doesn't mean that what we think and what they think are the same thing, especially for kids, especially in this situation. We don't know what it means for her to be okay. You don't want to say that. You don't want to make those promises that, I promise you're safe now. Really, can you? Do you know what might happen? I mean, you don't know. So don't make those kinds of promises, because you're just setting yourself up to break trust. Using basic needs as a consequence, that's obviously not something we would do, but you want to reiterate that that's not going to happen. Asking about the details of their trauma right out the get-go, like, you'll get to that. There's a process there. It's not right away. It's just not. It's recognizing where they're at and meeting them there. Pretending to know what happened to them or how they feel. Yeah, again, they're coming from the mindset that even if you've worked with other kids like them and you have a better idea than they might think you do, saying, oh, that must have been really hard when this happened. Unless you have that relationship there and they can connect and she can realize that you're saying that from a genuine place of care and concern, she's gonna think, you don't have any idea what I've been through. Again, remember, her worldview and what she's been taught is no one understands this. No one will understand you. No one understands what happens. It's very different. So saying that right away is not going to help you build that connection that you want to build. And then again, using those words. Victim, no one wants to be a victim. No one wants to be told that they're a victim. If and when she's ready to use that terminology after some therapy and some additional help, she may. There's lots of victims that I've worked with that even after the fact, months after therapy and things like that, they will still not use that word. They don't want to be seen as a victim. They don't want to be seen as someone that was vulnerable and was easily taken advantage of. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't make them feel like, you know, it's something that they wanted to be a part of. So it's really not that big of a deal what terminology is used for them, as long as they work through the process. When we talk about treatment, obviously that's going to look a lot like what we just talked about. We're all aware a little bit about the hierarchy of needs, the meeting of basic needs and the order in which that stuff happens. It's really important for these kinds of victims because, again, a lot of those basic needs were used as punishment and held against them. So one of the quickest ways to connect with someone coming out of this situation is to start meeting those basic needs, and for them to see that that's something that's consistent, that's not going to change, and that's not going to be used as punishment or consequence against them, regardless of what they do. If they stand up and cuss you out, you're not going to say, well, I guess you don't get dinner tonight. Like, that's not a thing, but they don't know that. And so that consistency is easiest in working with these victims when it comes to basic needs. That's how you're going to start to build that rapport and that trust. You know, the physical needs, obviously the housing and the food. There'll be some hoarding, there could be, of food. Don't be surprised if that's the case. Because again, remember that food was probably withheld from them as punishment, so when they do get it, they need to prepare for not having it. Medical care, there's a whole lot that can come out during those kinds of exams. A lot that can be told about the history, about what happened. Have they had any abortions? Do they have any sexually transmitted infections? They probably have not seen a doctor in a very long time. They may not even be totally aware of what an exam, a full physical exam entails. Remember that the unknown is what creates the most fear. So if you have a kid that needs to have a doctor's appointment, needs to have this happen, as much information as you can tell them initially is what will be helpful for them, including, do they need a support person in the room with them? whether that's you, whether that's a foster parent, whoever, like being able to ask those things, what would make you most comfortable, being able to explain why this stuff is happening for you to make sure that their body's okay, that they feel better, you know, anything like that. And I know that for me, like when we're at the Y and I'm a part of these exams, sometimes that happen, most of the time what I notice is that they don't, if they choose to stay present for the exam and not dissociate, they want distractions all the time. Oftentimes I will say, do you want me to talk or do you want me to just be quiet? Like as their advocate, as their support person. And they will say, either they won't hear me at all, which tells me they're not present, which tells me I don't really need to say anything, like they're not there. Or they'll say, no, just talk to me about something. Like talk to me about, so we'll talk about music, or we'll talk about food, or we'll talk about just generic, like nothing scary kinds of things, just to keep the conversation going. So it's always okay to just ask. Like if you don't know, just say, hey, do you want me to talk? Do you want me to not? Do you want me to hold your hand? Do you want me to not? Do you want, like, what do you need, essentially? Psychological needs, a lot of this is stuff that we would assume would be part of this. I will say that the shame and the grief piece are pretty significant, as well as the self-harm and punishment. The idea that, okay, if you're not going to punish me, though I know I messed up, that's the world I come from, so I need to punish myself, or I need to hurt myself. And so then, you know, you could see different kinds of self-harm, different kinds of punishment. Maybe they will choose to withhold food because that's a punishment that was done to them, so they're doing that to themselves. In our world, like logically, we're like, well, that doesn't make sense, why would you? But remember, it's not about what makes sense. Like none of this makes sense. What people do to people in this situation, that doesn't make sense. It's just the world that they're coming from, and the closest way for you to be able to help them is to understand that as much as possible, so that you kind of, one, already know what to expect, and two, can kind of meet them where they're at in the best way that you're able to do that, having not experienced something like this. Social needs, one of the biggest things in terms of social needs is the discipline versus punishment piece. To them, discipline and punishment is one and the same. So they would use those words interchangeably. Getting in trouble is punishment. Doing something bad, punishment. So when you're kind of explaining the cause and effect, or you know, you got angry and you threw this cup up against the wall, and you know, your juice or whatever spilled out of it, they're expecting a punishment. And so being able to explain to them that consequences, discipline, whatever term you use in your house or in your world, is different than punishment. And being able to really break that down for them, the cause and effect piece of it. And being able to know that if they don't have those coping skills, which a lot of our kids don't in general, then you have to give them something to replace that with. You can't simply just say, hey, we don't throw glasses in here. Okay, but if I feel this way again, and you've not given me any other options of things I would do, what do you think I'm gonna do? Like I don't, you know, and I think sometimes we get tripped up because of the age of the kid. Well, you're 13, 14, 15, 16, you should know. Well, they don't, because who has taught them that? Like they come from this worldview that's very this equals this. You have to tell them that. It might feel weird, you have to tell them. They can't be in trouble for not knowing what they don't know. Like you can't punish someone for that or give them a consequence, so you have to tell them. You can't just assume that they know things. I think that's one of the biggest things to convey is we don't just assume because they look normal or cognitively seem like, yeah, you know, they don't have any cognitive disabilities or anything. It doesn't matter. Their worldview is this. That's what's going on in their brain right now. That's where you have to meet them. Keep in mind that social norms and peer-to-peer interaction, they're really not going to know how to navigate that. The whole idea of what do you even talk about? Because when I was in this relationship, we talked about sex, or we talked about clothes, or we talked about what not to do when we were with guys. Now you're telling me I can't have any of those conversations? Well, what the hell am I supposed to talk about? Like, what do people even talk about? I don't know. So giving them ideas or saying, hey, what if you guys watch this show or play this game, or they're not going to know. And again, what we know about kids is until they're given something else different to do, they're going to continue doing what they know to do. And in this world, this is what they know. Everything is highly sexual. That's what you're going to see. Yeah.
With that being said, so how would you, for instance, a couple of the girls that we seen earlier, how would we get them to not kind of perform the same type of scenarios now instead of with adult males, with these young boys that they're around now?
Mm-hmm.
Here they're not, prostituting themselves out, but now that's who they are, so now they're performing these things with these boys now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is challenging their thought process. So I can think of someone who I used to work with who we went to Meyer to practice life skills. And so we went to Meyer and we were talking about budgeting and things like that, and there was some boys that were around her age that came by, and she was completely distracted by, there's these two peers, it's like the switch turns on in their head, like I'm supposed to be this now. And really was trying to adjust her shirt so she was showing more skin, was flipping her hair, was checking her makeup, it really was like a switch just went off. And so, she said this boy's cute or whatever. Well, it's age appropriate. I'm like, yeah. And she goes, I think I want to date him. And I said, oh, well, what do you know about him? Why would you assume that because he's cute, you'd want to date him? Well, I mean, he looks good. Well, what else do you know about him? Do you know his name? Even? Do you know? And for her, it was like, oh, no. And I was like, yeah, and we haven't talked to him, so we don't know how he acts. What if he's mean? What if he, tells you to F off? And she's like, oh, well, I don't think he would do that. He seems like someone that wouldn't do that. Well, how do you know? And do we base interactions off of what we think people would and wouldn't do, or what we know? So it really is just breaking that down and challenging some of those behaviors and thoughts in a way that isn't criticizing her. I was not about to say, hey, what you're doing is inappropriate. You shouldn't act like this. It's flipping it and taking a more positive approach and saying, oh, okay, yeah, well, what do you know about that? Or it's a good opportunity to say, hey, what are some qualities that you think would make a good boyfriend? And she was able to list 2 or 3, and then I would say, I wonder, do we know any of those about this person? Well, no. Oh, so then maybe we don't know if they would be a good boyfriend? Well, I guess not. So you can just kind of see, it's not, you're just wanting to challenge those kinds of things and ask those questions in a way that gets them to think about a situation differently than how it's been ingrained in them. That's really what you want to do. You're really rewiring that part of their brain, so to speak. That's what we're doing. Rewiring the brain. So the resilience piece of it, we work with kids that come from lots of traumatic backgrounds and things like that. I would assume, and I think it's safe to assume, that we wouldn't be in this line of work if we didn't think that they were able to overcome and heal and change and do all of these great things that we think that they're capable of doing. Education, part of what you're doing right now, I think is a big part of then helping to know how to work with these kids, being aware of the indicators of sex trafficking, all of that, paying extra attention to kids who have a history of runaway, being kids that have run away or have lived on the streets for a period of time. If you know family dynamics where there are lots of people coming in and out of the home, was a parent or guardian prostituting or in that kind of lifestyle before the kid came into care. Any of that information can obviously kind of help you put together the narrative that they come in with them. I will say, in working with victims, a lot of the girls that I've worked with are incredibly resilient to me. With the stories that I hear about the things that have been done to them, that have been said to them, it's amazing to me how at the end of the day, there can be more and more moments that then lead into days where they will say, oh yeah, I guess I forgot that all this happened to me. And I think, really? Because I remember every time I'm with you. I can't get it out of my head. So, but the resiliency and the desire to not want to live out of that past, not want to be that person, but not knowing that there was a choice to be anyone other than that person. So once you introduce experiences and relationships and the good things in life, the ability for them to really want to grab hold of that and run with that, I think is strong, and I have seen some really great things come out of that. And so the resiliency is there for a lot of these victims. Like, they have been through hell and experienced things that hopefully none of us will ever experience or know, but also they don't want to stay there once they realize they don't have to. And so then the good thing is that you get to be part of walking alongside them into something better, which is always great. I'm not going to go through this because it's in your little PowerPoint thing, but I think that this is helpful when it talks about child abuse, child sexual exploitation, and then eventually sex trafficking. And on one column you have like some of the thought processes and things that happen, and on the other column you have things that are more positive to kind of prevent sex trafficking and just that kind of thing. And so a lot of it is things that we would do with any of our kids in terms of boundaries and self-esteem and really encouraging them to be their own person. Just some resources for you guys. The NASA Project for Wedgwood, they've made a lot of tweaks throughout the years in terms of what's worked in terms of trafficking and significant sexual assault. The YWCA, I do a lot of work with them, continues to, I think, really lead the way in terms of working with victims of trafficking and sexual assault in general, I would say. Children's Advocacy Center, if you work with youth that are really young. And then Kent County Human Trafficking Task Force, that's a thing. There's the website if you want to visit it. I think that there's lots of good conversations, lots of people that are a part of that. Anyone can go to those meetings. They're open. I will say that if you're someone that likes more action than talk, that might not be your thing, because there's a lot of talk, not a lot of action. Though sometimes when you're in this world, you feel like you just need to talk to other people that get the magnitude of what this is, because sometimes a lot of people around us don't, and that's a source of frustration. So if you want to feel like you're not alone in thinking what the hell is happening, this might be a good place for you to go to. And then just resources, just where I got stats and things like that. I know that I'm a little bit over, and so I don't want to hold you guys. If you do have questions, I'm happy to answer any of those questions either now, or you can email me or find me. I'm over at Fuller. But I really appreciate your willingness to sit through something that's not that great to hear about, and hopefully it was helpful to you in the work that you do. And I'll see you at Art Prize.